Hey guys, welcome back. This is the fourth video in our Homeschool Bravely series. Alright guys, welcome back. I'm Laura Wilkie with Down Home with Lemon Pie, and we are currently going through this book, Homeschool Bravely by Jamie Erickson, together. I do recommend you get your own copy because I am not doing this word for word. I'm just touching on the high points, and of course we want to support the original author. So I do recommend you get your own copy, but today we are going to be starting on chapter 4. If you have missed any of the videos in this series, they are in a playlist called Homeschool Bravely on my on this channel, and you can also see the other books that we have done in the past as well. They are also in their own playlist. There is M is for Mama, which is a great resource for just motherhood and parenting. There is God Schooling. It's a very, very similar to this one. So if you're enjoying this, definitely check that one out. And there is the Hidden Art of Homemaking, which is all about making our homes beautiful and wonderful for our families. So check those out, but let's get started on chapter 4. So this book is divided into sections, 3 sections called parts. And we are in part 1, and it is 4 chapters long. So this is the last chapter of part 1, but chapter 4. And it is called Watch Your Own Dice. She gives at the beginning this little story about her family, and they were playing Tenzi. I don't know if you guys have ever played the game Tenzi. It's a dice game. We have played it, and I really, really enjoy it. I need to invest and grab that one because I think our family would really like it. But we played it at another person's house, and it is super fun. But basically, everybody has a set of their own dice. 10 dice. Each person has their own set of 10. And there's like a goal on a card or something. And the goal might be to get all of your dice to say maybe like so many 1s, so many 2s, or whatever. Something like that, right? And that's the goal. And so you just keep rolling your dice, right? You just keep rolling, and then the ones that match up with that group that you're trying to get, you set them aside and you roll the rest. So she's talking about how her son and their family, they were playing this, and her son kept losing. And it's really just a game of chance, okay? So there's not really any skill to it or anything. You're just rolling and whatever you get. So it didn't make a lot of sense to her why her son was losing every single time. And so she watched him play, and she realized that he wasn't watching his own dice. He would roll, and then he would watch to see what everybody else got, or watch to see who was the closest, or who was about to win, or who was doing really bad or good or whatever. And then he would look down at his, okay, and then he would roll again and then look to see what everyone else was doing. So she takes this story and compares it to our own lives. And I absolutely love this chapter so much because I've talked about this in many videos on this channel. I've talked about it so many times, guys. And I guess the way we use social media in today's world, we can struggle with feeling like we're just not doing enough, like we're just not good, because we have so many other things that we can see or access or look at, and it can start to tear us down as far as how well of a homeschool teacher or mom we are. And that's what she's talking about in this chapter. So she says it's easy to lose sight of what you're working on when you don't keep your eyes on your dice, basically referencing into your own home, right? And so that's why it's called Watch Your Own Dice. That's where the chapter title came from. And she says, so often we homeschool mothers take our eyes off of our own dice, the unique home God has given us and the call He has placed in our lives. And in doing so, we lose. It's easy to lose focus. Our lives are busy and noisy. Keeping up with everybody else seems unavoidable. Yes, my husband and I were super guilty of this. In fact, it's something that ultimately led to our salvation. Was we were just constantly trying to keep up with everyone else. This is back Years ago when we only had one kiddo, if you are brand new to this channel and you don't know, I do have 7 kiddos that we've homeschooled since the beginning, and they range in age from 14 all the way down to 3. But years ago when we just had one, we were looking to our friends, our neighbors, social media to see what can we do. We wanted to make every single moment just the absolute best and most beautiful. And so we were watching everyone else and we were doing all the things. And yes, we had some wonderful times and we did a lot of cool things. But what we tend to lose sight of, and she'll touch on this in a minute, is, you know, when we start comparing all of those pieces of social media together, like some mom you pull up is super good at science, and another mom's super good at math, another one's really crafty, right? Another one's home is always beautiful and tidy. What we don't do, or we don't realize, is that these are all different moms and these are all their strengths. These are not one mega mom who's just awesome at all of these things, right? And we start to kind of let that twist into our brains that we have to be awesome at everything. So that's basically what this whole chapter kind of touches on, left and right. But you'll see, she says, the constant stream of pressure poured out on social media has us all convinced that we're not doing enough. We're not organized enough. We're not fill in the blank enough. So often we see only the highlight reel of a person's life, their ideal days, their obedient kids, their flawless homes. The gritty parts get meticulously edited, and what's left looks magical because life always looks better through photo filters. It's true, right? We place someone else's extraordinary over our everyday and begin to feel underwhelmed with our lives and ourselves. Okay, I've always said on many of my videos, this is like my tidbit tip for you guys. Do not compare somebody else's best day with your worst day. Okay, so if somebody is sharing on social media, they're sharing likely something very good that they're proud of. Yay, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's their best. And then you're having, your kids are having a meltdown. This is the day when everything broke or whatever. The dog's barking, baby's crying, everybody's sick, whatever it is. And you're looking at their beautiful, perfect time that they've just shared and comparing it to your present, like your worst time, right? And it's not a fair comparison. Like if you were comparing their worst time with yours, it might be a little closer. But we kind of start to lose sight and we look around and we're like, oh man, we're not doing very good at all, And so that is what she's talking about here. This social media fueled pressure can feel particularly pronounced because we're at home. Most of the time, it's easy to pop onto Facebook 200 or 300 times a day. Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. It's often our one and only access to the outside world. We see not only all the must-do parenting posts and pins, she's talking about Pinterest and Instagram, but also all the homeschooling ones. So this is something I never actually put together, but it is true. Simple math shows that as homeschoolers, we can earn ourselves a double portion of mom guilt, not to mention the fact that it's all too tempting to use Facebook and Instagram as a bullhorn to shout and show the world all the grand and glorious things our kids are doing as a way to validate our decision to all the naysayers. So yes, she is saying here, we see the parenting things. Oh, you got to do this and this and this and this, like for motherhood, and then the homeschool things, and then we're just trying to keep up with it all, right? God didn't call us to do awesome at everything. We're human. He knows we're human, and he knows we're going to make mistakes and we're going to have all these things that go wrong. That's why we give our homeschool to God. She says on page 50, you might start out rolling your own dice with intensity. That's usually the beginning of a school year. And then you get distracted, usually around late fall or winter, and take all your eyes off what's right in front of you. Yes. So, I like this example here. She's talking about a salt dough map of Europe that you can, it looks awesome. So you think that your kids have to do it. It's a must-do history project, she says. Even though, this is the key part, even though your particular children would really just rather draw it in colored pencils. Yeah, sometimes we're so in awe of these amazing projects and things that we see. Well, okay, but maybe the mom who's doing that is super crafty or super gifted in that subject or whatever, and maybe her kids are really interested on it. I always find that we don't have time for those more extravagant projects. I always think, wow, that, and so what I end up doing actually is I'll show them to the kids, and I'll show, oh, here's something you could do if you still want to do this, if you want to learn more or whatever, to kind of give them an idea. But I don't necessarily always make them a part of our homeschool because, again, more likely than not, it's going to be a big flop, or it's going to be something they don't want to do anyways, or it's something we don't have time for, or what have you. Not saying that we don't do any of those things, but when I see a lot of them, like our science right now has a lot of stuff like that, and we just kind of skip over most of it because there's just not time to do everything, and we start to feel like we should do everything, but we just can't. Sometimes I will read through them and kind of file them away, and then maybe in a summer day or when we have extra time on a weekend, I'll say, oh, hey, let's try this, and we'll do it, but not necessarily exactly where it lines up with what we're studying. She gives next an example from a little quote here from Pam Barmhill. She is the author of Better Together and Your Morning Basket podcast. I love her as well. Met her personally, fun fact, met her personally at a homeschool convention. That was super fun. I was volunteering, and they had me standing in front of her booth and another lady's booth that I admire, and got to meet them and take the picture with them, and that was super fun as well. So anyway, good people. Anyway, she says, homeschool without the weight of comparison. That's what Homeschool Bravely means. It's being able to look at what your neighbor is doing, be inspired by it, gather the ideas, and do your own thing without feeling the guilt, inadequacy, or comparison. If the mom down the street homeschools in a skirt, an apron, and pearls, and you never leave your yoga pants, either change clothes or just own the yoga pant look. Homeschooling bravely is not being a victim, even to your own fears. I think that's interesting to note. Let's see. Underneath that, she says, stewarding their education well is not sinful, but a desperate grasp for perfection is. That is a good quote. I definitely highlighted that. A desperate grasp for perfection is sinful. It's a selfish attempt to build your own little kingdom, void of God's help. Seeking perfection usually leads to paralysis. And if you're like most people, when you see that perfection is an unattainable finish line, you end up giving up. You throw in the towel and assume it can't be done. But as we learn way back in kindergarten with the tortoise and the hare, slow and steady forward motion will get it done faster than an unrealized good intention every time. So I did like that. I also really liked this example. You can't just copy and paste your way to success. She's talking here, you see someone else do it and you think, oh, that's awesome, I'm going to do it too. And it doesn't work out for whatever reason. You can't just copy and paste. Okay. God doesn't want or expect you to do homeschool like the elusive Joneses family. He didn't give you the same tools that he gave them. I love that so much. So he doesn't expect you to build the same thing. You have unique gifts, time, and talents. I talk about this so many times in my videos because, very often I'm like, hey, we don't have that, but we have this already. So we're going to use what we already have. Or I found this at a thrift store, or we found this or whatever in our budget. God doesn't give us all the same things. Why? Because of what we talked about in the last video is he knows what his plan is for each of our children, and they're not all going to be the same thing. They don't all have to do the same thing. We don't all have to even do the same subjects because we're not all being, our goal is not the same for all of our children. God's goal for our children is not the same universally across the world, or we'd all just be clones of one another. So no, we have different budgets. We have different interests. We have different gifts, talents. We have different things that have been gifted to us, moms who bring you things, or you find things, like I said, at other stores. We have different access to places that we can get resources. So, yeah, I think that's important to note. You're never going to keep up with everybody else. My homeschool isn't supposed to look like yours. Yours isn't supposed to look like mine. Otherwise, we'll constantly get sidetracked by the success of others instead of rejoicing with those who rejoice. As Scripture says, you'll become bitter. That's Romans 12:15. The progress you saw in your children just yesterday will begin to look like decline today. I think that is so good to note. I have some kiddos that struggle in different subjects, math, reading, whatever, and I'll see them do something awesome and think, oh, wow, they really finally got that. Yay. And I'm excited. And then I'll see another kid the same age, maybe online, or a family member or a friend or something that I know is the same age, and they're like flying through that subject, right? What we don't remember to tell ourselves is that our kids have other gifts, and that same kiddo may not be doing as well in the things that our kiddos are doing well. And it's important to remember, even write them down or talk it out, because it is so true, and Satan will use all of those things. When you look at the collective perfection of everyone online, it's natural to inadvertently lump all of that awesome onto one imaginary person and forget that each of those amazing photos, musings, and memes have all come from different women. This is what we were talking about at the beginning. You find yourself believing that everyone is awesome at all things, and you're not. But the truth is, most of us are just awesome at one or two things and pretty mediocre at all the rest. I put little arrows and things at that section because it's true. I want to remember that we are not all awesome at everything. Most people are not awesome at everything, but the way social media is, it makes us feel like like we're the only one who's not awesome at everything. Okay, the next thing she does here, she's talking about a well-known mommy finance blogger and homeschooler that she has followed for years and just believed she must be awesome at everything. Everything's getting done, her family's happy, everything's awesome. And this particular person wrote a book, and I'm wondering if I know which book this is, which person this is, because there was somebody else that when I read their book and they explained how they get everything done, I was going, aha! So there's more to this story. And that's why I try to be so upfront with you guys, but I don't want you guys to feel like you're in that trap where you're looking at us and thinking, oh my gosh, they have it all or whatever, because it's simply not true. And so she was doing that with this particular blogger, homeschooler, mom, and noticed that she was just awesome. She was amazing. She had tips and answers for everything and everything. But when she wrote a book and this particular author bought her book and read it, that other blogger, homeschool mom, confessed that she doesn't do a lot of cooking. She chooses to eat out a few times a week instead, hires a maid service to do the cleaning. So she has and has a team of people to help behind the scenes with her blog. So she has groups of people helping her with things, other things in her life. So she's not doing everything. We assume, because, for example, we do home make all of our meals. So we assume, and when we see another homeschool mom that's doing awesome, that they're doing not only what we're doing, but also these awesome things that they're doing, right? And that's not always true. So this lady actually had cleaning people, cooking people, people helping her on her blog so she could write her book or do whatever and homeschool her kids. So there was a lot more to the story, and that part of the story is often not told. So we often don't see and think, oh, well, the reason they can do that is because they have, they have the same amount of hours in the day as we do, but now they have extra help and extra hands. So that makes a lot more sense. Yes, she says her words were so transforming. I had created this unnatural illusion of her in my head. It was a spotted unicorn kind of fantasy that was one part me and one part her, and one part every great homeschooling mother I had ever met. I assumed that in addition to finding the time to be uber organized, financially savvy, she also managed to accomplish all the other areas of life with an equal amount of awesome. And I knew I cooked every single meal my family ate and cleaned all the nooks and crannies of my cottage and handled all the business of my own blog, and concluded she must be doing all of those things as well. I took her highlight reels. This is important. I took her highlight reels and measured them against my everyday life. Yep. That's important to note. I like that. The highlight reels against your everyday. So here's something. Everybody is awesome at something. We're not all awesome at everything. Okay? If I stop to compare any area of my life to someone else's, I can easily get discouraged. Average isn't very motivating. So I choose not to focus on all those so-so parts and set my sights on my awesome instead. Awesome is contagious, and when I consciously acknowledge my own awesome, I start to see it grow. When she focuses on the talents and gifts that she has or that she's good at, then those parts kind of shine and everything else just kind of falls away, right? So she doesn't have to worry about making every single thing perfect and beautiful. We used to say Pinterest perfect. I think that phrase is kind of going away, but we used to say that a few years back, and that's what it would kind of feel like. She says, I'm not trying to forget or dismiss my struggles. I'm just not letting them commandeer my thoughts. I'm not allowing negative self-talk to steer my decisions. I like that. That's exactly right. I sat down to create a list of things I can do well in my homeschool. I had spent far too much time mentally cataloging all the ways I was failing, so I thought it might be time to come up at a personal assessment from a different angle. This is the author, I can create unit studies like a boss. I'm a stellar paper organizer. I've got this whole reading aloud with funny accents thing under control. So when she focused on the things she was good at, she began to see the real person behind all of that awesome. And it wasn't her, it was God. God had given her these gifts. God had allowed her to have the knowledge and the budget to do these different things, had wired her brain a certain way. And she said, these are my dice. This is what God has given me. So basically saying, take what you've got and run with it. Make it awesome. You know, we don't have to just think, oh, well, we don't have that exact thing, we can't do it. I do this a lot in recipes, okay? And you probably do too, but you just don't realize that it has the same application as to your homeschool life. But I'll do this in recipes. I'll see a recipe and I'll want to make it, but maybe there's one or two ingredients I don't have. And yes, there are recipes that you have to have certain ingredients or it just does not come together. But these are like minor ingredients, and I will say, oh, well, we'll just leave that out. Or we'll just use that and we'll substitute it for this, right? And it always turns out still fairly really good, right? Sometimes I'm Googling to find a good substitute for a certain ingredient that I might be out of. But more often than not, it still turns out fine. It's not like the recipe is completely destroyed because we didn't have whatever seasoning, right? It's usually perfectly fine to just keep moving. And I think that applies in our homeschool lives too, where we start to think, oh my gosh, this curriculum, I have everything for it except this one book and I can't find it, or it's too expensive or whatever. So the whole thing is just shot. We're just not going to be able to do it. It's not going to be good. We're going to miss that, and we start to tell ourselves that, or this craft project won't be complete or whatever. And we forget to get creative and to find another way to make it work. The next time you start to feel the pressure of average, look at your list that you made. You might be mediocre at some things, but then be willing to see and celebrate all the rest. Point the spotlight on the good dice God has given you, and in doing so, you'll be able to take the attention off the awesome illusion created by social media and competitive culture and putting it back on Him. Absolutely. Very, very good chapter. We're almost through with it, so stay with me. Sometimes the problem is you and me. Too often our sight gets moved because of an unholy trinity of me, myself, and I. You are probably your worst enemy. That's true. When God called you to homeschool, His request was simple: to teach your children His commandments when you sit in the house when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise. Deuteronomy 6:7. Sometimes, though, his clear instruction just to teach through living seems too easy, as if there should be more to it. So, and she adds in all these things, these crazy things that we start adding in, all these competitions and projects and reports and all these things. And there's this blah, blah, blah. There's a significant amount of pressure coming from that little piece of the pie, all dedicated to the idea that if you just knew the right methods, used the right curriculum, went to the right conference, did the prescribed 10 must-do science projects, you would have homeschool heaven. Suddenly, I like this sentence, suddenly God's simple call to teach your kids his way becomes a 3-ring circus. Isn't that true? No matter where you draw a line of perfection, there will always be someone who thinks it should be moved somewhere else. No matter how much you add to your homeschool day, there will always be something else that you could have added or done. Nothing wrong with enrolling your budding thespian in a community theater or teaching your French to your 6-year-old, but only if you're doing it because you feel like it's a part of God's big story for that child. If, on the other hand, you're piling on a heap of extras simply out of obligation or to impress others, you are committing spiritual adultery. You're clamoring for approval from everybody else and coveting the home, talents, children, husbands, budget they have, assuming that if you just had all of those things, you could surely homeschool well. You are misplacing your focus and forgetting all about the well done that matters most. Matthew 25:21. I love this because sometimes my husband will kind of keep me in check here, because sometimes I'll see something online and I'm like, oh, and I won't say anything about it, but I'll see it, and then a few days later, and then weeks later, and then I just keep thinking, oh my gosh, we need that. I think we need to get, and I'll just keep on, right? And then I'll mention it to my husband and he might say something like, well, we don't really have the money for it, but if you have to have it for their school, you can get it. And it like stops you in your tracks and you're going, well, we probably don't really need it. We could probably get on another few months without it. I could probably find something similar somewhere else, or we might even have something to make it work. Never mind, and it's good to kind of that check and balance, I guess. So going to page 58, this is the last page in this chapter. She says, don't think you're alone in all of this. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Yes, his yoke is easy. You are to teach his way when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. If you're fearful, perhaps it's because you've allowed something to steal your gaze from your own dice. Perhaps you've begun to look outside of your own gifts and your passions and have brought your eyes to someone else's methods, someone else's calling, or someone else's children. Take your eyes off social media, set them on Christ and the awesome He has given you, and invest your time in the simple instructions for teaching that God laid out long ago. These are your dice. I like this so much. It's a good chapter. This whole section was really good. Yeah, it's good. So we do so often find ourselves blinded by social media and creating these mythical mamas who are just awesome at everything, and it's easy to forget that. We have things that we're good at and things that we're bad at, and they do too. And it's easy to focus on all their good and focus on all of our bad and then compare them, and it doesn't really match. It's not even. And then we get, struggling and frustrated or whatever. So that was really good. If you guys are enjoying this book, Homeschool Bravely, I do recommend, like I said, grab your own copy. I grabbed mine on Amazon, but you can grab any bookstore that is your favorite or online store. We are going to start part 2 next week, which is called The Struggle. And then part 3, we will start after those weeks of part 2. So stay with me, guys, and thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.